So we have a bumper crop of panelists here for you today. This show, which is show number 14, is a very special one. And we're extremely pleased to welcome 3 people from Chinese music services company, Kanjian, who's a partner for Music Ally China, to the show this week. And I'll introduce them in a second, but this show this week addresses in quite a contextual and fundamental way, how you connect and understand the China music market. Now, the China music market is of huge interest to people all over the world. There's so much technological development there, there's so many new ways of working there, and it's such an exciting music market at the moment. And this show is designed to help share understanding of that quite different business and cultural context that it operates in. So we've welcomed our partners from Kanjian, and this show is partly based on a really, really good one-page document. Well, it's a multiple-page document, but it's one web page by Kanjian, which explains the Chinese music market in English in a really clear side-by-side way. Kush Patel, our behind-the-scenes Music Ally person, is going to share that in chat with you shortly. And I recommend, if you have the opportunity to do this, to keep this open as we're talking, and you can reference some of the things we're talking about. They're going to talk about today how in China, they're going to talk about the basics of the market. They're going to talk about how artist branding must hit different touch points and how to build a long-term diversified approach across multiple businesses in order for success in China. So we're going to talk about all these things, but let's introduce the panel first. We have Kanjian's VP of International Business, Tinko Georgiev. Hi, Tinko, how are you?
Hey, Joe, very well indeed, thanks.
Thank you for joining us. Everyone is in Shanghai, by the way. And we should note that it is 8 p.m. on a Friday night in Shanghai. And that is, for me, is the biggest sacrifice anybody has made so far to join the show. And we did have someone getting up at 6 a.m. in Los Angeles to join it. So this is going beyond my expectations. Thank you all for doing this. We also have Jane Polubotko, International Marketing Manager. Hi, Jane.
Hi, thank you for having us today.
A pleasure. Thank you for joining us. And last but by no means least, Yutong Situ, International Business Specialist. Hi, Yutong.
Hi, thank you very much for having us.
No, pleasure. Thank you very much. Now, accompanying them, as always, is a regular guest, Henriette Heimdal, Market Development Coordinator for Europe and the UK at CD Baby. Hi, Hen.
Hi, Joe. How are you?
I'm all the better to see you, Hen, of course. And I was going to say last, but by no means least, Patrick Ross, SVP of Digital Strategy at Music Ally. Thank you for joining us, Patrick.
Joe, thank you for having me back on the show once again.
It's always a pleasure, never a chore. Now, we are going to split the panel in a couple of ways today. I'll explain how. We're going to hear about Tinko, Jane and Yutong's understanding of the Chinese market and their experience. And then Patrick and Hen in London are going to talk about it from perhaps that perspective. How do they think that people can help integrate with the Chinese industry from other parts of the world, and what can they learn from that industry? Before we do that and start the panel, Patrick, for those people who don't know, let's say they're joining and they just don't know, what does Music Ally do? And can you tell me more about the Sandbox Summit Global on the 21st to the 25th of September?
Yes, Joe, I could certainly do that. Well, as hopefully most people know out there, Music Ally is a knowledge company. Hopefully you're getting our daily news and our Sandbox reports. Of course, we have our wonderful partners in China here with us today, so we've got a bit of global reach as well. Part of that global reach, pulling it all together, we're going to be having our Sandbox Summit Global Conference. Unfortunately, couldn't be doing that in physical location given the current world climate. However, that's really opened the doors for us to have a wonderful group of panelists and guests that are going to be coming to speak. Sandbox Summit Global, you can see it in the chat right there. Please come and join us. It is free to attend. It's a 5-day event, just 2 hours each day. So it'll be the best 2 hours of your day that week, September 21st to 25th. Thank you very much.
With some really high-profile international guests as well. Definitely worth joining in with that when you can. So let's see. I've sort of half shared it, but I'll share properly now Kanjian's one-page document on China in the chat as well. Okay, so let's get started. Now, when we were setting up this show, I had a conversation with Tinko before this started, and he said that, and this was a really, I think, revealing idea, and was the idea behind this whole show. He said that what's most important as a starting point is a contextual overview and understanding of the market itself. I was asking all sorts of complicated questions about new apps and new approaches to work. And he said, well, actually, we can talk about that, but it needs to be within this context. And so we've built this show to be a sort of a contextual understanding, but also talking about opportunities at the same time. So what we, like I said, Tinko, Jane, and Yutong, they're going to be giving us the contextual overview with thoughts, analysis, and experiences of the Chinese market. And Hen and Patrick are going to be helping us sort of translate it into the localized markets that they are in and looking for opportunities. So let's start with Tinko, Yutong, and Jane. I want to ask you a few simple questions to get some contextual understanding of perspective and learnings on the industry itself. Let's start with Tinko. This was your idea, so you should go first. It's your, when you try and explain an overview of the China music industry to people, what kind of learnings do you describe to them? What do you say? This is what I notice and what I learned from working here.
For me, the biggest change in perspective when I arrived at Kanjian in Shanghai was that that understanding that in China things are revolving more around a business opportunity rather than fragmented copyrights. Without going into too many details, the idea is that in China, the music business, especially at the top level, is consolidated in the sense that the artists control full spectrum of their rights in pretty much most of the cases, and there's a they are the decision maker, or there's one or two decision makers tops, and opportunities can be realized very, very quickly. That for me is the biggest takeaway and the first thing when it comes to you said learning process. It's not really as much learning as understanding process.
Okay. And this is something which we've seen actually when we look at the Chinese music market. We see the rapid pace of development there, and this is down to, you're saying, this inherent cultural and business approach to just moving things forward.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah. If anyone out there, by the way, while you're watching, if anything we're talking about sparks a really good question, you want to put a question to the panel, please hit the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, and your question will go straight to Patrick and Kush, who is secretly off screen going through everything, and we will bring all the good questions and put them to Tinko, Jane, and Yutong, and you can get answers right from the experts in Shanghai. So please do ask questions, and we will answer all of them as long as we have time to. So thanks, Tinko. That's a really good starting point. Jane, what about you? How long? What have you learned while you've been there? What have you learned about the industry?
I think something that I want to say, and Tinko started to bringing up, is definitely the speed. And it's definitely not only about music industry, but in general, China development itself. But here, when you see it from within the country, how things are happening, I think it's really fascinating, especially the speed of decision making, for example, the way people communicate within the workspace. That would be like not emails, but short WeChat messages. So yeah, I think the speed is like the first thing that I was like, wow, that's moving pretty fast.
And when you experience that speed of everything, not just the business moving, but just communication, everything. Once you overcome that initial sort of surprise of change, how does that benefit you as someone working in that industry?
I think that you learn how to adjust to things that you don't expect, or to things that you have to react quickly as a professional, as a marketer, as a music industry professional. So yeah, I think that would be my answer.
Great. And what about you, Yutong? What's your sort of big impression of the industry?
Yes. before I started moving back to Shanghai and work in Kanjian, I work in Warner Music Asia in Hong Kong, and I work on the international repertoire in the international markets. So it's kind of the West and the East. The biggest thing I could say is everything is moving very fast, because there's several reasons about it. Because of course there's a communication difference. People are outside of China still communicating work stuff through their emails, and in China everything's in WeChat. As a real-time kind of messengers. People just reply everything fast. And another reasons for everything is moving faster is because what Tinko said. Other artists, the top-level artists have the full control of all aspects of their rights. And also this actually leads to a lot of creativities in the promotions and a lot of other things, because they control everything in their hands. So they can do a lot of things, which in the West is controlled by different companies. And it goes through a very long process to get approved, everything, This is also the reason why everything, even the taste or the demands of the audience is also moving very fast. People getting interested in one thing, and this interest just disappeared very quickly. So not only the artists really need to move fast, make fast decisions, and be very creative in China.
So that speed of decision making is not necessarily because they're forced to move that quickly. It's because they can, because they have complete control and they can do what they want when they want.
Yes, they can, so they move fast, and now there's demands, and you need to.
Great. Okay, that's good. Perhaps at this point, Tinko, I'm going to come back to you and say, from that sort of personal overview, perhaps you can explain what Kanjian does for the benefit of people watching, and how that perhaps the business of what Kanjian is in China is how it works in the Chinese context compared to perhaps somewhere else in the world.
Well, thanks. I'll get back to that in a second. I just wanted to add something about communication on WeChat, and something we were talking about earlier in the office today, actually. The fact that, and this is that socio-cultural perspective that I think is slightly different here. It would be extremely difficult to get the direct messaging app or phone numbers with your colleagues, but in the office, given that the communication goes through WeChat, and I'm talking about the regular WeChat, most of the time it goes through the regular WeChat, not the corporate edition, the business edition. That basically gives you a direct private access to pretty much any of your colleagues. So we have nearly 100 people within the team around the different offices, but it's extremely easy to communicate at 8 in the evening or 11 in the evening about business. And just to give you an idea of how this affects business and opportunities and that decision making we're talking about, in a regular environment where you have a chain of emails that may be seen over a few days, that basically requires 5 to 10 people within the office to exchange a handful of messages, spending less than a minute each, and within a few hours a decision is made, and an opportunity can be acted upon, or a plan can be made or adjusted. This is the kind of real-time communication that you get, which blurs the personal space with the professional space. I mean, in that sense, this affects definitely the process.
I see, yeah. And then in the sense of, let's talk about Kanjian for a moment then. What does Kanjian do, and how does it work in the context of the Chinese market?
As a general understanding, Kanjian is a music service company. We provide the full 360 spectrum of the services available within the industry, everything from distribution, publishing, from live booking, business consulting, and arts and label services, dedicated marketing promotions, and including artist management to the extent that artist management within the context of China for international artists. And how does this work within the context of China? It has to be a 360. It's very difficult to focus on one particular niche and expect for the business to be sustainable or to grow. It's not possible. And we'll talk about this, I guess, later in the conversation, that the opportunities that come with that 360 coverage.
Okay, well, let's move on to that that discussion then of a sort of a comparison, if you like. So one of the most interesting parts of the Kanjian page, which was describing the Chinese music industry for people outside of China, was a part which sort of does a side-by-side comparison. You've already mentioned a few of the key differences about being able to have close control over your rights and of your work, and how things can move quickly because of those controls and decentralization, things like that. So we're looking really here at the China approach versus the traditional approach. And obviously the different approaches work in different markets in different ways. But what we want to understand is what that approach is in China, and perhaps what the benefits of it are. And then we'll bring in and your recommendations of how people from outside of China can plug in to that and utilize it to its best extent. I picked out a few of the key ideas here. One that really stood out to me was you said that in China, you need to have a long-term vision through diversified assets and a portfolio across multiple industries, which you've just mentioned, Tinko, versus a sort of what Yutong mentioned, which was a shorter-term vision through a licensing monetization approach, which is a very broad way of looking at the difference between the markets. Tell me, perhaps, who would like to start? Perhaps we'll start with you again, Tinko, and we'll go around again and go by Jane. What is this idea of diversifying as a brand, as an artist brand, diversifying your assets and portfolio across multiple industries? How does that work actually in China? What does that mean?
Well, obviously we try to, with that comparison on the website, we try to generalize and provide a sort of a bird view understanding rather than a specific case. And it would depend between artists and between brands, whether it's a label or a music company. The idea is that, again, in China, for me, I'll try something very a bit more generic, and then maybe Yutong and Jane can add a little bit more details. The Chinese entertainment industry is very celebrity driven, very much celebrity driven. It's that perception of the idols that drives it, that moves forward and progresses the business, makes the business tick. Somebody in our company 3 years ago told me many of the people that go to concerts, we're talking about thousands of people that go to concerts, they don't go to listen to the music, they go to see their idol. And that understanding that gives you an idea of what we're talking about here. It's that being able to cross from music to TV or the film industry, maybe fashion. You have this is what's the intent behind this diversification. You do not stick to just being a music artist. It's not possible to appeal to as many people if you are just a music artist. I think we've been looking at certain examples to make them a bit more comprehensible and a bit more easy to understand earlier today. And I think maybe Yutong and Jane can jump in with an example, or just add a little bit more about this. The artists like Jackson Wang or Luhan.
Jane, Yutong, maybe.
Jane, do you want to start with Jackson Wang?
Yeah. I also wanted to add up to the fact that I feel like the musicians' boundaries, the musician boundaries here in China for an artist, they kind of like a little bit faded, because the musician is not only musician, he or she are not only doing music. Music is just like part of the bigger portfolio, which is acting or modeling, or it can be like designing, a lot of things. And as we mentioned, Jackson Wang, he's a pretty good example of doing all of those sorts of things, you know, being a model and act. And recently he launched his new creative agency, which is like clothing design, creative solutions. Like there's a pop-up store which is advertised on all of the platforms, you know, like ticketing platforms or like shopping apps. So yes, it's the artist here is really involved into so many other activities, which definitely helps him or her to target a you know, like the people within different interests or genres or activities, and kind of like engage those people into this conversation, like fan artist conversation.
Do these, when we talk about artists, we're talking about musical artists as the sort of center point here. But do people, do they generally start as musicians and then spread out as actors and models, or do they start as a model and come and then add being a musician to their portfolio, or is it everything?
I would let Yutong answer this question.
Yeah.
Okay.
There could be both ways. Some of them starting their career as musicians. There's a very interesting case. You know, he started his career like this. It's like there's a guy called Joker. And Joker Xue, and he started his career as a musician, as a singer, and he released several viral tracks and very hit tracks like 10 years, 15 years ago, and kind of faded away from the public size, and then. What brings him back is because he's attending a lot of comedian reality shows. He's acting like a comedian. He attending these shows. He never sing, never, you know, kind of announce or tell people that I have new music or say that he is a musician. And he just gradually getting back into the public, and then he get back to the music industry again. Now he is like a very successful top level musicians again, and. And just adding on what Jane said was a little in addition to with some, you know, Western artists as the examples for you guys to understand it more easier. It's like almost I can say that all popular international artists in China is not popular only because of his or her music. There is something else what is attracting the Chinese artists' interests. For example, Cardi B is a very recent one who goes viral and her track getting into the chart. This is purely because she is posting a lot of funny videos and talking about how success the Chinese government is doing for coronavirus and stuff like that. And she get onto the trending on the Weibo, which is the Chinese version of Twitter, you know, the trends. And then she get the attractions and interest from the public, and public start to stream her music. And she is not only the musicians, but also kind of a personalities or celebrities in China now. And this is same applies to other artists in China as well. There's something else other than the music. And so crossover and other stuff is very important in the Chinese music industry.
Yeah. If you have these, we'll call them artists, but we're talking about them as kind of multifaceted brands. If these artists are, let's say they're a model, they're a personality, they're a singer, they're a TV actor, where is it wrong? Is it the wrong way to think about it, to say, well, where do people connect with them on a daily basis? How do they, where's their first point of connection with these artists? Because if they're doing things which make them popular, they've got to broadcast that somewhere. So how do the public generally connect with these people, whether they're musicians or actors or whatever?
Currently and previously, like recent 10 years, it's mainly TV shows and internet TV shows. Internet TV show is very big in China because young people started to stop watching cable TV and just only watching those kind of internet TV shows like Netflix, Chinese version Netflix, iQIYI, Tencent videos. And what I just mentioned, Joker Xue, he comes from this kind of internet TV shows, comedian, like funny TV reality shows. And this is before, and now and in the future, I guess, Douyin, these are short video platforms. A lot of artists is doing parodies videos or challenge videos, trying to show the face outside of the music to the fans. Also connect with the fans, like in the daily basis.
And Douyin is very similar to TikTok, right? As a platform.
Yes, it's exactly the same. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Right. Okay. Great. So with that in mind, then the other thing you were talking about is once you have this. Well, perhaps actually I'll put at this point I will bring in Hen because and Patrick, because they've been sitting there very patiently while I've been asking all these questions about this interesting stuff. So Hen, let's start with you. You work with CD Baby. You're working with artists and in a distribution sense, which is perhaps a little bit more focused in the music industry in terms of how you approach it. But you're essentially interested in a lot of the similar things, which is taking an artist, growth, and reaching people. How often do you deal with artists who are as multifaceted as what we've just discussed? Actors, artists, models, slash.
Rarely.
Rarely.
Very rarely. But also I think that's very much to do with the kind of segment of the market that I work in, being very, very independent focused and DIY, is that they haven't quite gotten to the point of their careers yet where they can diversify because there's not enough of a team available, I guess. But we have amazing team members all around the world. So we have a guy who I think is on called Keith, who's based in Singapore, that does a lot of work with our artists, obviously specifically focused towards the Asian markets, and help kind of build release strategies with them and advise both domestic or regional artists, but also acts that fit, or the international acts that want to move into the Asian market. So I know that he works very hard kind of trying to get a lot of these type of clients that you guys are describing is very much something that he focuses on within that region.
Why do you think that I know you deal with a specific area of the industry, but we've just heard from Tinko, Yutong, and Jane that this is the normal approach to, musicians are a lot of things. That's quite different to the market perhaps we're used to here in Europe and in North America. I'm going to ask you a difficult question now, which is why?
Because I think we have personal opinion, but I think in this part of the world, we have a long history of the music industry, and we have not saying that other regions don't, but I think we have a very specific.
So it's being established.
Exactly, and I think we have this idea that might be a bit romanticized in terms of what a musician's career should look like. If you're a rock band or a punk band, you're supposed to go through all these different steps of your career to get to the end point. And these ideas are kind of ingrained in people before they even get going, that it's very difficult to stop and look outside and draw in inspiration from other regions where they might have looked at established Western methods and thinking and gone, cool, but let's elevate this, let's diversify and make it a completely different experience. And I think that's a big part of it.
Right. Thanks, Hen. Patrick, oops, I just dropped something noisy on the floor. Patrick, you, amongst other things, you are SVP of Digital Strategy at Music Ally, but amongst other things, you work very closely with artists in artist development, career development, branding, all those kind of things that are required to grow an artist in terms of, and to communicate. What do you think that, two questions, and I'll give you the first one first. Would you like to work with an artist that has that multifaceted approach, is an artist, is a model, is a designer, and is a musician? Do you have experience of working with artists like that, and what are the advantages?
Sure. I mean, actually, especially as a trend, for lack of a better word, given the current global climate of what's been going on, I'm finding more and more artist managers that I speak to around the world actually suddenly approaching things in that matter. So, in a way, maybe China's been leading the way in this idea of having, a multifaceted career. Because especially now that, we still in most countries in the world don't have live back, which was obviously a big part of our industry. I'm finding more and more people that want to have an artist that is diversified, whether that's being able to write and produce, but also able to dance, able to entertain. It's actually become, I think, far more attractive to have lots of facets. So I actually find it quite inspiring that the Chinese model is different, And I think there's a lot to be said as well for everything. I mean, Tinko and I have been working together for a while, and I have to say in the beginning, it was a lot of what he was saying, just I couldn't understand it. And bless him for being patient to keep understanding, because there's a level of understanding. And I think that there's a lot we can learn from each other. And actually, I think that some of these shifts are actually taking place over in our markets as well, as we've kind of dealt with this global crisis.
Let's perhaps take a couple of questions from the audience then. We have a few. Patrick, any that have caught your eye in particular?
I mean, we've basically got two that have come through. We'll go with this one first. Is within China, and again, this is sort of kind of in the diversifying sector. So here we've been looking at, since COVID, there's been an influx of musicians onto Twitch, for instance, and a lot more people are saying, what else can we do in the gaming sector? So just wondering, hopefully a question out to our wonderful Music Ally China partners. Yeah, what are the opportunities of gaming, and how does that work in China, if it's any different than it is in the West?
Yutong,
Who would like to
would you like to take that one?
Yes. Actually, as we were talking about, the musicians are building up their other kind of business or characters. There's certain musicians in China, especially in the EDM field. They're building their character in the e-gaming, esports or gaming kind of areas. They are musicians, but also very heavy enthusiasts of esports. They live streaming their esports every day, every week. I don't say every day, but they regularly do that. And esports, people who are very who likes esports have specific, in China, they're mostly EDM listeners, especially those Chinese local EDM listeners. So there are certain artists who are taking this advantage and putting themselves into that areas to kind of cross over themselves to attracting more audience. Just coming back to, I just want to say about the reason why in China artists need to have different kind of characters, not only musicians, but doing also other stuff, is because the music exploring behavior, I think, is pretty different from in the West. Because in the West, all the labels are talking about when new music is dropped, you cares about New Music Friday, on Spotify. It's very important. But in China, people are actually, most of the Chinese people still are not used to like listening to new music every day on certain playlists. So people need some external drivers to hear this kind of music. It kind of force you to hear it several times without your you notice, and you don't mean to listen to it, but you heard it and it feels pretty good. Then you start to stream it. So this is the reason why it's so important for the artists to have some external stuff, other stuff, to kind of to express or to show their music to the crowds.
Okay.
On social media.
Yeah. So they find the areas that work for them. Could be gaming, could be anything, and they generate attention there, and then it transitions across to standard music consumption. Do you find, Yutong, then that an artist has all these different components of their career, but they have one area that is perhaps their main area? So that if you're rooted in gaming music, you will always that will be a big part of the business for you.
Yes, this is a lot of actually there's some quite a few of our Chinese artists who are facing this kind of problem. They are sticking in the community, and they are using the same kind of strategies to approach, when they are trying to find the demographic and the behavior of their targeting audience, and they find the overlap part. For example, EDM, they find out the EDM players all like the esports players likes EDMs, so they overlap to the EDM. Then when they look at the EDMs, how the EDM fans, act, their behaviors, then they find another overlapping part and get crossover to that part. They're kind of constantly crossing over.
Yeah, I see. Okay, great, thanks. Jane, a question for you, which someone has posted in the chat, which I've just spotted. And I think this is kind of a symptomatic question, perhaps, of a lot of people from outside of China will look in and they'll say, we're used to having artists, Taylor Swift, who is a music artist, and that's what they are. And how does anybody have the time to be a music artist that's a superstar, and an actor, and someone producing all this short form video, and perhaps a fashion designer. We see that to an extent. You know, we see lots of musicians occasionally launching fashion labels or something, but how does that work? It sounds to some people, I think, that how can you even do this? How is it feasibly possible?
Well, the way I see it, I think there is a team behind the artist, and that's why each Chinese idol has like Team Wang. His you know, his team is called Team Wang, and then there is like another guys who are using lab or headquarter, or you know, there is like, and it's like a label, but it's not really a label, as I just mentioned about Jackson Wang, because there's way more than that they're doing. So I think it's really about like having your company, and then the artist is like the CEO of the company that is moving and driving the whole, you know, the whole group together. Yeah.
If I may jump in, if you allow me, Jane mentioned Jackson Wang. I mean, really, when we're talking about being multifaceted, we're not talking about 10 different faces. We're talking about maybe 2 or 3, the key ones. Of course, you want it to be everywhere. And something again, we've been talking about in the office. It's usually an international artist, when they get invited to a TV show or radio show or anything else, they would try to figure out whether that matches their identity, their artist whether they will be perceived as still that authentic artist versus being a trade-off. And that kind of consideration doesn't exist in China. As long as it brings you more fans and more wider audience, then that's somewhere that engagement you take. You get on, you jump on that opportunity and you do that TV show or radio show, whether it's an interview. And specifically, and you know, talking about artists of that level, A-list artists, Chinese. I remember just before Christmas, we were talking about one of those artists, and he had maybe for the next 6 or 7 months planned at least 2 activities per day. Talking about international artists, how many of them would have the time to be all these things? Well, I'm talking about Chinese artists having at least 2 professional appointments a day for the next 6 months.
Right.
Whether it's a TV show, an interview, live gig, brand endorsement. Yeah.
Sorry, just to jump in, like, this isn't a new thing in the West either, though. Like, like Western female artists, I think maybe specifically female solo artists, have been juggling a lot of these responsibilities, being fashion designers and actresses and artists, or even within the hip hop world, is not necessarily such a new thing. But I think from kind of a Western perspective, it happens in the top 1%, maybe, or 0.5% or something. It's not something that we focus on until you get to that point. For me, at least, that feels like a big difference.
It's a good point. It's more normalized across the board in China, perhaps. Patrick,
that's a sorry. That's a very valid point. Handmade there. It's this is my personal perspective on those the elite, that top level of artists. What happens is usually you achieve that status, you get there, and then you start diversifying. Then you start bringing your cosmetics brand or fashion brand. Whereas in China, in order to achieve that status, you need to have this diversification done as part of the process.
Right. I mean, so that's a good overview there, really, of the understanding, or initial understanding, at least, of how artists are in China in terms of what works in that framework. We've obviously got an audience here of people watching from around the world, and we're interested, you know, and they're looking at China and saying, wow, this is a really exciting market. They're seeing how it works, they're seeing opportunities, they're seeing this huge audience. How then, perhaps for one of the team at Kanjian, what works when an artist from outside of China comes to China and is successful? How does that work? How do people take an artist from outside? What do they have to change, bring them to the Chinese market in a successful way?
Can I just jump in with that, just to set our friends at Kanjian up, because I've been asking this question for quite some time since we've been working together. And I'll kind of try to tie in one of the chat questions, which is kind of, what is the size for the UK alternative or electronic acts in China? How can those UK Indian alternative acts break into China? I mean, these are the questions I know that these guys get all the time. Like, you keep saying that they have to be an idol or a pop act, but how are they going to make it? How are they going to market? And I just remember a conversation when we first started working with Kanjian, and Tinko, again, being very patient, but trying to explain that things are different. And we often look at, I think, Western-wise, of the words emerging markets, which, you know, there are emerging markets out there. And it's this idea of, how do we go in, dominate these emerging markets? We'll be #1 on Spotify there. We'll go and do this. And actually realizing that China is not sort of emerging in any way, shape, or form. It's actually one of the most established markets. And when Tinko actually put it back to me, and I will let them talk more about this, because they get, and that is what a lot of our audience wants to know, of like, how do I quickly break China? What are the 2 things I need to do to go boom, boom, and be huge in China? And Tinko, I think one of the best things he actually explained to me was this. He goes, if I said to you, how does a Chinese artist become #1 in America? I go, oh, well, they're going to need to tour there. They're going to have to do TV. They're going to have all these. And I think that was the first connection between us, in a way of like, you see what I'm saying? Like, there is no just, hey, Chinese artists import to America, #1. It's, you got to invest in the market. And I think that's the thing. And also all this nuance that they're talking about right now is how it works. So this idea of, but how do I bypass all that and just sort of do what I'm doing in my territory? Yes, I would love Kanjian to, because I know you guys get these questions all the time.
How do you do it, Tinko?
Right. Well, just to get back to Patrick on that one, I think I remember he said something shortly after, and not maybe just before the whole coronavirus thing started. He mentioned something about it's not an easy job to get to reach out to 1 billion people, and it's not a cheap thing, didn't you?
Yes, for sure. Yes. Yes, exactly.
Yes. Having said that, that example about breaking a Chinese artist in the States is a very good example. Anyone who would be looking at BTS and what preceded, what did they do before really becoming a success in the States, they can understand what really goes into breaking a completely different market. But I think Yutong maybe can add in a bit, maybe an example, maybe a bit more details. What we think is the starting point. The starting point is a long-term vision. You cannot expect to thinking about a Russian DJ or a German, as was the question about UK alternative electronic music. UK going to the States is easy because it's the same language. But how would a Russian electronic music artist go to the States and try to break speaking Russian, posting what is relevant for them in Russia? It's not possible. You need to be able to speak the language, whether it's through an interpreter and by means of a local team, or you actually can speak the language. That definitely opens quite a lot of doors. And then it's keep pushing, keep investing. In China, the main issue Western acts are facing is not competition from other Western acts, it's the competition from the Chinese acts. Because these people, especially the ones that are making really good money, they are putting lots of that money back into the business and into developing their own brand. And there's only so many artists people can listen to in China. So it's thinking about this. The competition is much more fierce than you would be anywhere else. You need to set up all your social media, and you start building that. When I'm talking about social media is just one part. Of course, talking about developing that multifaceted area of your brand shortens the time. Thinking about how long it would take if Patrick and I start a band tomorrow, how long would it take us to get into the charts, provided we have some good songwriters? How long would it take us to get there? How long would it take us to fill up a stadium? It's a long journey. And in China, actually the opportunity is much bigger if you diversify, because you have the option to reach out to much wider audience in a much shorter time. But the rules of the game are pretty much the same. It's just a matter of investment, whether it's resources, whether it's people, whether it's time, whether it's money directly, putting money into this, and yeah, building the brand. It's not much different than anywhere else.
Yeah,
it's just yeah.
Yeah, so, Yutong, I just want to bring you in here to talk about it, because you've obviously you were saying earlier, you deal with international artists, you deal with homegrown artists in China. And one of the things we've discussed is about how artists need to make these multiple touch points for different parts of society and community. How would an outside artist outside of China, it's clear that if they want to have success in China, they have to invest in people, they have to invest in resources and time, because it's a huge, complicated market. What do those touch points look like for an outside, for an artist coming from outside of China into China? Where would they connect with Chinese society?
First of all, definitely is what Tinko just said, social media, and there's a lot of there's several successful cases already. Recently, other than Cardi B, Cardi B is mainly because she is pretty famous in United States already, and there's some heavy core international music fans who already likes her, and they're starting to repost all those funny stuff on the Weibo, and becomes viral. This is one point to show the world that other than the music, what you are looking like, give them the external kind of drivers to the streams. Other stuff is that you own your own social media, and you are showing what you got outside music. To provide that kind of tools. The recent case, as an example, is Troya Sivan. He is just posting a lot of stuff on Weibo. I think he's posted even probably more than on Twitter or Facebook. He's just posted a lot of stuff, like normal afternoon, just selfie videos saying that, oh, the weather is so good. Just kind of showing the stuff, triggering people, like, from the social media then to the music. This is very important. Another way, I think it's a very kind of fasten this kind of process is that collaborations, because what we mentioned, that crossover, the mechanics is always the same, even for the international artists. It's always the same. You need to break into other people's fan base so that you get more fans. So if you can collaborate with the Chinese local artists, and then your music is automatically being heard by that fan groups, and it's a very quick way to tackle to get into the market. Look what BTS did in the United States. BTS just collaborate with a lot of top level artists. Recently, even the Blackpink, recently she did a song. They did a song with Selena Gomez, and so normally, without these collaborations, it will be just. The chance would be little for Blackpink, a Korean idol groups, to break into the American people and being heard by American audience. But with Selena Gomez, it just becomes very reasonable and easy to penetrate that kind of market. So this is, I think, these two ways are the very important and very quick ways to break into the market.
We've got a good question just popping up in the questions. And before we come to that, Patrick, because it is a good one, Jane, I want to include you because I realize you've been left out here. So maybe quickly, when an international artist comes to you, Jane, at Kanjian, and says, right, I want to be successful, and you say, okay, here's what you have to do, and you explain all this, what is their response generally?
The artist response or our response?
The artist response when you explain all this.
Just before I jump into the question, I wanted to add a little bit on the previous question that Tinko and Yutong mentioned.
Sure.
Just want to say, like, a very kind of obvious, I think, thing is the biggest challenge is overcoming the cultural gap. obviously. And I think it's very important for the artists, international artists, to be relatable to Chinese audience. Like think what like why the girl in China can can like me or be interested in me, and like be kind of trying to be related to the Chinese culture. For example, from practical point of view, the social media posts from the artists that has something to do with China, like touring in China or Chinese food or saying Happy Chinese New Year, are always gather the most of the engagement, rather than just simple things about touring or just regular things. And coming back to the answers from the artists, like we're trying definitely to educate the clients and the artists that we're talking about, tell them the market is very different. And the most common reaction that I see is that there's very high expectations from very short period of time. So from one release or two releases, I feel like the artists expect a lot without knowing the market and knowing that things don't work that in the same way, or sometimes it's very difficult to predict the return on investment or the expectations, just because it's difficult because of the short time. With one release, there's not many things can happen, like given that the artist is not very big in China and outside of China.
How do you ever say to them, look, you need to invest this much time, you need to give it at least this many months?
Yeah, definitely. We say that it must be at least 1 year with like one release per 1-2 months, and doing promotion around that, doing some activities within China like collaboration or participating in other Chinese projects that companies here are doing.
Yeah. So they need to understand that they need to, it's not just something they can do as a sort of on the side. They have to really focus and get stuff for a while.
Yeah, correct. Like,
okay.
and have full attention.
It's good. It's good to be upfront with that. That's important. Patrick, we've had as always is the case, with 10 minutes to go, we get a flood of questions. So let's go through them.
And just with that last point, though, I just wanted to back that up. And as Tinko said about, what does it take to reach 1 billion people? They also, as you've explained back to me as well, though, that investment, like the amount that people actually get paid for a television performance in China, I think is one of the conversations we had, is you're not understanding that there's big money to be had, but there's also a big investment to reach it. And I think that's a very important thing. One thing that hasn't actually come up today that we often, I think, find in the West is slightly different and understanding the difference. And it is, of course, we have influencers around here. And that has certainly become something that's become much more buzzworthy. But of course, in China, you have key opinion leaders. And I was just wondering if you all could explain a little bit about what key opinion leaders are in China and how that differs from an influencer, and how that can actually be really important for an artist to be able to break into the Chinese market or be successful there.
Who would like to be our key opinion leader? Yes. Okay, Yutong. Yes.
Yeah. It's very interesting. The key, when artist is kind of paying this kind of KOLs, they don't pay for single ones. They pay series of KOLs, like 20 or 30. They forms kind of like a spread chain, so that it makes sure everyone see it several times. And it's not only because when the artists just come into the markets and there are followers on social media, there's very little followers, so their content is not penetrating everyone. So they need these KOLs to spread out the words. A lot of times I can see that those artists, even they are not only paying for their music contents, they're even paying for KOLs to repost on their normal daily life contents or whatever, their love affair or even gossips. This kind of stuff, in order to show everyone that I have different stuff other than the music,
right? And
I'm so attractive in the personalities or whatever. This kind of
So it's really building out that multifaceted.
Yes, KOL is playing a very big role in building out the whole character. And after a KOL, posting this kind of stuff, and according to what their followers are commenting, and they were changing their kind of directions as well.
And just give some context for people who aren't familiar with key opinion leaders, KOLs. How many followers do these kind of KOLs have?
There's also levels, like there's starting from several hundred Ks to several hundred to several millions. Even as there's someone like 20 million. There's KOLs like that as well.
Okay, that's some influence. Yeah.
If I may add,
sorry.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt. Just
yeah,
ladies first.
Oh, okay. I'll be quick. I just want to say that coming back to the point where we were comparing East and West, KOLs are actually the legitimate media sources and outlets here. It's well-established music magazines in the West here don't have the same authority as the KOL. So if you want to promote your music, you would be like, as an artist, we suggest to target more KOLs rather than doing like press releases campaign or getting in touch with media. Yeah,
right.
That's it.
Pretty much what I wanted to say as well. There's those KOLs act as media channels rather than really influencers, and the intent. Well, sorry, the audience, they know that these KOLs are getting paid, whether it's through an agency or by the artists directly. Still, that there's nothing wrong with that, and they consume whatever is being blasted at them. The audience consumes that content, and then the music comes relevant. If the music is good, if the music sticks, then they will listen to that music and they will follow that artist.
So they don't mind, that they understand the framework. They don't mind. They just, if they like it, they like it, and they're happy with that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Patrick, do we have any more questions you want to bring in? Or...
Well, one just came in that I actually would really like to get an opinion on from some of our key opinion leaders here at Music Ally China. Given the current global climate, and particularly the country that I'm from, with some very anti-TikTok rhetoric coming from the guy at the top, I think you guys are probably aware of what's been going on in the United States of America. Have you noticed actually within China, is that having any impact on the Chinese audience? I mean, are you hearing those stories about what's going on there? And is there any actual within China reaction to this kind of TikTok gate, as I'll call it?
Yutong?
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, you passed that on quickly, Tinko. I appreciate that.
Go right ahead. Sorry, I want to know.
Yeah. The news, everyone knows the news. The news is constantly being reported on the TV like every day, like the latest updates of what U.S. court say and what Trump said, and every day. But I don't think it actually I think affect TikTok or Douyin in a very positive way, because people are starting to more people knows it and more people use it instead of just young people. So it's right. Definitely not negative.
Yeah. So it's a sort of, because the Douyin has such a big user base and is such a big part of communication. It's just a sort of side issue really to what's going on. Hen, let me ask you a question, because you've been patiently, and I appreciate that. When you hear all this, we're dealing with a very, very different. I say we. I'm talking about us here in Europe. Suddenly looking at a very, very changed music business landscape. And we're looking at a situation where this old way of working of like you have releasing here and you have touring here and that's it, essentially. And now people are looking and saying, well, we need to have, as we mentioned earlier, and some people in the chat have mentioned, they're talking to managers, and managers are saying, my artist needs to have this income stream from doing this, and this income stream from releasing music, and this income stream from being a model, actor, whatever, and or whatever, different areas using different platforms. It's easy to see that in China, this is already happening. These multiple income streams, these multiple touch points. Well, we talked about this a bit before on the TV show. What would you recommend to artists that you're working with about developing those opportunities in other areas to make a bigger brand for themselves?
As in diversify what they're doing in terms of becoming a fashion brand. I think your key starting point should be within your own circle, right? And like understand the space that you're operating within, and maybe it makes sense for you to move more into fashion when it comes to kind of merch or try to get more opportunities within acting, modeling, whatever. And I think a lot of artists are doing it, but I also think look at the kind of companies in the West that you're collaborating with, because I think there's a lot of companies in the West that are trying much more so to apply that thinking that these guys are explaining from the West, in terms of, you know, having that artistic freedom and artists retaining their rights and staying within an ecosystem of companies. Like we do that. We have like starting from the CD Baby points and moving kind of through the ecosystem of like Fuga and Dashko and Downtown Music Publishing and Song, like we have all these different facets where we can comfortably be a partner for an artist throughout their careers. And I think as an artist, I would be looking at obviously not just us, but ideally, but like look at those kind of companies and what they can offer you in terms of support in diversifying. Because as these guys have been saying, this requires a team. It's very difficult for you as a single DIY artist with no manager to be able to do this, but also lean into your local industry because they've got the connections. So like independent trade organizations or Department for International Trade, they organize trade trips, you know, they have the connections in the Chinese market. I know that Tinko and Jane have been working on launching like an AIM or A2AM equivalent in China. Take advantage of those networks and try to learn.
Hen, you obviously work with artists with all sorts of different agreements, but you work with a lot of artists who, and this goes back to what we first talked about, have a lot of control over their rights and a lot of control over their work, which is in the UK and Europe is still a relatively new phenomenon. Do you think then that these, as you look forward now into this quite changed music landscape, those artists who have retained control and as they look forward are going to have a rich set of opportunities coming their way because they can collaborate with anybody. They can look outside the existing system, collaborate with any brand, any platform, and if they're innovative, if they've got control, they can make it work.
Which is like one of the first things I think Yutong said right at the beginning. Speed at which you can pivot when you're in control of everything yourself. You know, if you within this massive ecosystem where the emails have to go back and forth and up and down for weeks on end for a simple decision to be made, opportunities can be lost. Whereas if you are in control and you have a network around you of industry partners and people that you work with that are not on your side, but that understand your vision, you as a brand, you can pivot much quicker and take these opportunities and develop much faster, which I think is super interesting. And also it's pretty fun to work with artists because they want to work with you, not because they have to work with you. I just have to say that, like, it's really rewarding.
Yeah, good. Well, look, I mean, I would be very happy to keep this conversation going for a long time, but I'm aware that we've been talking for an hour and that for Tinko, Yutong and Jane, it's now 9 p.m. And look, I want to let them go out and do whatever they're going to do on Friday night. So let's, with the spirit of that in mind, let's wrap things up. Tinko, perhaps we can start with you and we'll go around to Jane and then Yutong. If you could give the world outside China one really key piece of advice for understanding and engaging with China. I know this is a big question, but what would that one thing be? Tinko, let's start with you.
Yes, I'd say for me that would be act now, because
Nice.
yes, as in there's we have a monitoring how international A-list artists are performing in China, and quite a few of them are kind of on the same level, but quite a lot of them haven't really paid any attention to China, and I would say that they're kind of lost in between the millions of artists that are now in China, international artists, which actually opens the door for a lot of those musicians and artists that are mid-level to top-level artists. We have within our catalog artists that are making pretty much, well, they can live off, let's put it this way, they can live off the revenue they generate from within China alone. And these are names you've never heard, very unlikely you've heard outside China. We have these artists within our catalog. And granted, they're not hundreds of thousands, but that's where we are heading. And there's going to be, over the next few years, those who act, they will be able to carve a niche for themselves in this huge market. And we all know what's the potential. The Tencent numbers are the paying subscribers numbers from the recent report are showing that it's going forward. It's going into the desired direction. And within the next 3 to 5 years, that window of opportunity of artists, anywhere from startup artists to A-list artists, will close. My suggestion is act now. Get focus on China and act now. You need to focus on China.
That's a clear suggestion, and I'll do you a favor here, Tinko. I've put the link to Kanjian in the chat. So if you want to connect with Tinko to help you out with that focus, you can contact them there. Jane, so act now, act fast. What else? What would you tell someone about engaging with China as a basic, simple rule?
I'm gonna add to Tinko, definitely act now and try to be engaged with the Chinese audience, with the Chinese culture, try to be relatable, try to find those, those bits and pieces that you're fascinated about the country, the culture, and try to be present within the market, with the collaborations, with the different activities, events that are happening here that are, different companies are doing online right now, since the touring is not a thing at the moment, unfortunately. Be active in China.
Great. And Yutong, what do you tell people?
I think what I think is nothing is irrelevant towards success. You need to catch all the opportunities, whatever in the first opinion you think it's not relevant to my music genre, to my character, to what I like as what is my music. But all opportunities can connect into your success in the music career in China. So nothing is irrelevant.
Great. Patrick.
Yes.
When you're operating outside, I'm going to ask Hen the same thing. You're operating outside of China. You look at China as a place of opportunity. What excites you the most?
Leaning on people I trust. And we've been developing a relationship with Kanjian for a while now. And as I've said, it's been a learning process for me. But having people that you can trust on the ground to help you to understand has been really eye-opening, and I'm starting to understand and see the opportunities, and thank you for being patient with me. And that said, the more that we understand here at Music Ally, do get in touch with us. This is our partners at Music Ally China as part of Kanjian, and we would love to be doing more to help cross this conversation. We've been working real hard on it to understand each other, and we would love to share that knowledge with the rest of the world.
Yeah, and Patrick shared some email addresses in the chat, digital@musically.com. You can get in touch and approach about anything like this. And it's clear that you need to engage with China, a team. You need a team on the ground. That is absolutely my biggest takeaway from this, to connect. Hen, you were talking earlier about, at CD Baby, you have this very internationalized and layered team. When you look at the China market, what really interests you about the future there?
The vastness, I think the cultural difference really fascinates me, and absolutely at which the speed. But I think for me, working in the indie sector and kind of always have done that ability to, as we talked about before, retaining your rights and having a completely having a career where you are in control throughout the whole process, and that you can do that from start to finish. I think that's really, really fascinating. And, when you look at the market shares of the three majors that we know in the West, and they collectively, they have less than 20% market share. I think that is a really fascinating statistic for us, to make us understand what happens in that marketplace, and that you need to think differently, and you need to educate yourself, and you need to have trusted partners, as all of you guys have said.
Yeah, and who better to do that with than Music Ally, CD Baby, and Kanjian, of course. Finally, let's wrap things up. Tinko, Jane, Yutong, thank you ever so much for joining us. It's been a really, really fascinating and incredibly enlightening educational hour. And if someone wants to get in touch with you, how is the best way for them to do that?
Yes, through our website, kanjian.com, and or just customer@kanjian.com.
Yeah, and you're keen to hear from anybody around the world, clearly.
We work with businesses and individual artists alike.
Good. Well, like I say, as we've said, act fast, act now. Hen, well, you can act fast and act now. How do people get in touch with you you particularly at CD Baby?
So email UK@cdbaby and that will come to me. But I also just wanted to say that resource on the Kanjian website that gives a brief overview of the Chinese music market is so fascinating. So if you have any interest, you should check that out. It's really, really good. Sorry.
Yes, I will. No, you're absolutely right. I will reshare that in the chat now before everyone leaves. And Patrick, same question to you. If people want to engage, you mentioned about collaboration with China, learning more and understanding. How do they get in touch with you, and what are the ways of doing it?
Yeah, well, obviously musically.com. Make sure you're subscribed and sign up. Go to our YouTube channel, subscribe, follow, like, all of those wonderful things. Or digital@musically.com will get through to us, and hopefully we can help.
Excellent, of course. So, thank you all very, very much. We've had an enjoyably international session from Shanghai to London to Berlin, where I am. So that's all been very pleasing to see everything work. And what we're hoping is that this will be the first of relatively regular sessions. Maybe we'll do another one of these in 3 months or so, and we can focus on another element of China, because as we've identified, we could talk about this all day, but we're not, because I'm going to let the people for whom it's nighttime leave now and get on with their lives. So thank you, Tinko, Jane, and Yutong. Thank you ever so much for joining us from Shanghai. Hen, thank you for joining us from CD Baby in the UK. And Patrick, on a boat in London, thank you for joining us. As always,
Thank you,
join
Joe.
us. Thank you. No, it's very kind of you, Patrick. And please, we will email you for the with details of the next show, which will be coming up very soon. And don't forget Sandbox Summit Global happening towards the end of September 21st to 25th. Sandboxsummitglobal.com. I've been Joe Sparrow here in Berlin. Happy Friday, everybody, and see you soon. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.